You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss one case from each year, starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
And we're to episode 14. 14. Officially in the teens, not like just a teen.
That's
like
right.
We're in it. And we're in the year of 1812. So, got a lot of events that happened this year.
There's a war that happened
there is
that
a
year.
war in that year.
Named for the year.
Named. But there are a lot of events that happened in this year. A lot. So, our sources for this week.
Nice little song.
The Chicago Reader, the Chicago Tribune, and document transcripts from the War of 1812.
The war I just,
Yes.
mentioned.
Correct. And as you can probably guess, this took place in Chicago since most of my sources are from Chicago. That's because we are covering the first murder in Chicago.
The first murder in Chicago?
First murder in Chicago.
I doubt it's the first murder in Chicago.
It's the first murder in Chicago.
Okay.
This was right when Chicago actually became a city.
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
So our events in 1812, like I said, we got a few of them. So let's get to them. In January of 1812, the New England Journal of Medicine was first published in Boston, by Dr. John Collins Warren. January 10th, the steamship, its name was New Orleans. Anyways, it confused me. The steamship New Orleans, which was the first on the Mississippi River, arrived in its namesake city and completed its maiden voyage. February 2nd, Russia established a fur trading colony at Fort Ross in California. April 4th, President James Madison enacted a 90-day embargo trade with the UK. April 20th, Vice President George Clinton died while still in office. April 30th, Louisiana is officially admitted as the 18th state. May 8th, Hail to the Chief was published and made the presidential anthem of the U.S.
No. I almost started doing it, but I refrained.
June 4th, the leftover portion of the Louisiana Purchase that was not a part of the newly formed Louisiana state was renamed the Missouri Territory. June 18th, the War of 1812 began between the U.S. and the British Empire. July 12th, Americans invaded Canada at Windsor, Upper Canada. October, the capital of Pennsylvania was permanently moved from Lancaster to Harrisburg.
All right.
November 5th, James Madison defeats DeWitt Clinton in the presidential election. And DeWitt Clinton was the nephew of George Clinton, who had died that year. So these are some undated events that happened in that year because they were, they were really cool things. In the year of 1812, the City Bank of New York was founded. The General Land Office became an independent agency of the U.S. government, which was responsible for land in the public domain. The Old Oscar Pepper Distillery was established along Glens Creek in Woodford County, Kentucky. This is the oldest Kentucky bourbon distillery and is now better known as the Woodford Reserve Distillery. So they're the ones that make Woodford Reserve.
Fascinating.
Type of bourbon. Leah doesn't know this.
Sorry, guys.
The Baptist Training Unions, now called the Wayland Baptist Theological Seminary, was founded by escaped and free slaves in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Princeton Theological Seminary was founded in New Jersey, and it is the second oldest seminary in the United States. The oldest, just because I had to know what was the oldest, is the Andover Theological Seminary located in Andover, Massachusetts, and it was founded in 1807. So just a few years before. Our births for this year, February 15th. Charles Louis Tiffany, founder of Tiffany and Company, is born.
That's a pretty store. Did you go into Tiffany when you were there?
I walked past it. I didn't go in.
Oh,
it was late when I went. So,
so pretty.
Charles Tiffany is a Aquarius. I don't know. October 22nd. You'll appreciate this. James Grizzly Adams. Mountain man extraordinaire and bear trainer is born. He's a Libra. But I wonder if he made those bear shelters. It's not a shelter for bears.
I told my family about that. There was much laughter.
In my head for that moment, it did not make sense. Why would you have a shelter for the bears? Why? For some reason, in my head at that moment, I was like, "That's stupid."
I mean, and I did.
And
give
you're
you
stupid
credit.
for going.
and I gave you credit because I was like, and I looked at her and I went, "What?" And then you were like, "It's not for
the bears."
Bears. It was very funny.
So, we do have some deaths for this year that were notable. May 12th, Martha Ballard, midwife and diarist, died.
Oh, yeah.
She was the one from our Purrington episode.
Yes, Polly Purrington.
She died that year, Polly Purrington.
Cat.
Yes. December 20th, Sacagawea, interpreter and guide on the Lewis and Clark expedition, died.
And I know that it's fictional, but I love her in Night at the Museum.
I know. Night at the Museum's really, God, so good. Night at the Museum and National Treasure are those movies that I could just always watch.
Mm-hmm.
I need to watch National Treasure again. There should be a third national. Okay.
With Riley. I love Riley.
Let me get on my National Treasure.
Who wants to go down the dark creepy tunnel first?
The dark creepy tunnel of death. Oh, he's so funny. There should have been a third one, and I don't know why there's not a third one. A little mad about it because such good movies. I love history so much. And anyways, why we have a historical chronological true crime podcast. Anyways, August 17th of 1792, Jean Lalime arrived in Chicago.
Say the name again.
Jean Lalime. Hold on. He arrived in Chicago after working his way as a trader through the frontier. June 17th of 1812, Jean Lalime was murdered by a fur trader named John Kinsey at Fort Dearborn. On Twitter, I specifically tweeted to our French and Canadian listeners how to say his name because Google let me down because I like to put things in Google and it'll tell me how to pronounce it. And it said Lalime. And I was like, Lalime? That doesn't. And it's spelled two different ways. Some people spell it L-A space lime, like it's literally spelled lime. And then other people put it together as like one name. But I did ask Twitter to make sure. And there's a podcast called The Trail Went Cold. And they
like that.
Yes, they're one of our Twitter friends. And they said that there was a very famous NHL goalie named Patrick Lalime who pronounced his last name Lalime. So they said that's probably the correct pronunciation
Well,
of
let's
it.
go with it.
So, but you know me, I had to know. I don't like
You don't want to butcher someone's name.
Yeah, I hate to do that, and especially if I could figure it out. So I had to resort to our Canadian friends to figure out how to say that.
Well, and my maiden name, there's more than one way to say my maiden name.
Yeah, there is.
And if you say it one way, that's the way it needs to be pronounced. And I will still correct you, even though that's not even my last name anymore. So you got to say it the right way. On some documents.
I was going to say, I thought you.
On some documents.
So, into our case. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are about to see a story of murder, greed, corruption, violence, exploitation, adultery, and treachery. All of those things we all hold near and dear to our hearts. If you are someone who is very involved in thespian pursuits, then you will recognize that as the opening line from the musical Chicago. Unfortunately, we are not talking about that Chicago in this episode. We are talking about, as some would say, the Windy City, Mud City, Chi-Town, the Second City, the City by the Lake, the Heart of America, the Great American City, or the 312, which was the city's original area code before 773 and 872. By now, you should know it's the city of Chicago, Illinois. Weirdly enough, the official name of the city is City of Chicago, not Chicago. City of Chicago. Very odd.
Interesting. Have you been to Chicago before?
I've flown into it, but that's about it.
I've been there.
I've always wanted to go. The first known non-Indigenous permanent settler in Chicago was Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable.
That's a mouthful.
It's a very long name. And that was in the 1780s. He is considered the founder of Chicago. And in 1803, the U.S. Army built Fort Dearborn, which is where part of our story takes place. The fort was destroyed in 1812, the same year of our case, by British and Native allies, but rebuilt later. The city of Chicago was officially incorporated. Let's see. Did not put that there. Anyways, the city of Chicago was the world's fastest growing city for several decades. Chicago's first railway, I think it's Galena or Galena, and Chicago Union, it's Galena. I remember looking it up. Chicago's first railway, Galena and Chicago Union Railroad and the Illinois-Michigan Canal opened in 1848. This canal allowed vessels on the Great Lakes to connect to the Mississippi River. In 1871, the Great Chicago Fire destroyed an area 4 miles long and 1 mile wide.
That one was the one that was
yes,
I know. Barn.
Yes. A whole lot of the city remained untouched, like the railroads and the stockyards. A major reason for the massive spread of fire was due to wooden structures common in buildings in the city. The buildings after were built of steel and stone, and this is actually, the Chicago fire is what set the standard for construction worldwide. Chicago went on to construct the world's first skyscraper in 1885 using steel skeleton construction. This building was the home insurance building, and they also said that the walls were 16 inches thick. It's real thick when you think about it. So it was originally 10 stories, and then later 2 more floors were added. Unfortunately, because we can't just leave anything alone,
No.
the building was demolished in 1931. There is so much history in Chicago.
Yeah.
It could be an episode on its own, like a lot of things that we discussed. But for this time period, I think we're just going to stop there and finish with famous people you might not have known were from Chicago.
Oh, Oprah. She's not from Chicago.
we have Robin Williams, Harrison Ford, Walt Disney,
I didn't realize that Harrison Ford was from Chicago.
Dwayne Wade, Michelle Obama, John and Jim Belushi, Hillary Clinton, Maria Shriver, John Mulaney, Hugh Hefner, Shel Silverstein, Chris Hansen. All of you should know who Chris Hansen is. Please tell me you know who Chris Hansen is. To Catch a Predator? Do you never watch that show To Catch a Predator? Where they would he would come into the room and it would be like in a kitchen and these grown men had been talking to what they thought were children online.
Kayla.
Anyways,
What do I watch?
I know. But what's so funny about it is so these guys would show up at this, where they're supposed to meet these quote children, but they're actually like actors that just look really young. They're all adults. And then Chris Hansen would just pop out in the background after they actually
incriminate themselves.
Right. Chris Hansen would just pop out of the background and just be like, hello.
Oh, dear.
And the show was called To Catch a Predator. And it was Chris Hansen. It was one of the best shows. So anyways, Chris Hansen's from Chicago. And God, of course, Leah doesn't know who that is.
I'm sorry. I was too busy watching Disney. Or Friends reruns.
Leah's going to know who this is. Mandy Patinkin.
Yes.
Indigo Montoya. That's who he was. Indigo Montoya. Yeah.
He killed my father.
And the rest of you may know him as SSA Jason Gideon from Criminal Minds.
Oh.
And Joe Mantegna is also from there, who my follow lovers of Criminal Minds will know as SSA David Rossi. Both great men. That's only scratching the surface of famous people from Chicago. And yes, for the true crime buffs, I am aware that John Wayne Gacy, H.H. Holmes, and Richard Speck also lived there at some point. Also, would like to point out that both Harrison Ford and Robin Williams are cancers, much like myself.
I'm a Harrison Ford fan and a Robin Williams fan.
Also,
by the way,
John Mulaney. Leah doesn't even know who John Mulaney is, guys. Anyways, she's going to have to figure out who he is because John Mulaney is hilarious. John Mulaney and Chris Hansen are Virgos like Leah. And since I literally put this in my notes. And since I'll be surprised if Leah knows any of those, other famous Virgos not from Chicago or even the U.S. are Keanu Reeves.
I know him.
He is actually from Beirut, Lebanon. And Sean Connery. Do you know where he's from?
He's from Scotland, as my 5-year-old nephew says.
Fountain Bridge, Edinburgh is where he's from.
That's Sean Connery.
So there you go. On to our story.
Rest in peace.
Go to it now. I know. We watched The Hunt for Red October last night. It was the first time I'd seen it. It was really good.
I'm so glad that your man is making you watch all the good classics.
We had the first conversation last night where my boyfriend genuinely had a visceral reaction and looked at me and he just goes, guys, not in a bad way. We are a very joking couple. He just goes, that makes me want to hit you.
And he wouldn't hit her.
No,
he really wouldn't.
Never. But
because he knows that I would be after him, and so would my husband.
And he goes, I don't even have words for.
What happened?
I have not seen any of the Indiana Jones movies.
What? You can say nothing to me about all your crime people if you have not seen Indiana. You don't know who Short Round is?
No. And we're
so
the reason that I figured this out is because
you've not seen any of them?
None of them.
None of them.
None of them. And the only reason that we figured this out was because we were watching The Hunt for Red October, and there was an actor, and I was like, I know him. Where have I seen him? And I looked it up. It was Sam Neill, Jurassic Park. But we're scrolling through, and I was like, what other movies has Sean Connery been in? And I was scrolling.
Last Crusade.
I was scrolling through, and I was like, oh, he was in Indiana Jones. And my boyfriend was like, yeah, you didn't know that he was in Indiana Jones? And I went, I've never seen Indiana Jones. And that was when he physically jumped backwards. We were sitting on the couch, and he just goes, that makes me want to hit you. It's like,
Kayla, you can say nothing to me about all of your little crime show things.
Look, I've put in so many hours of crime, it's not even funny.
Okay.
This is what I have to explain.
He is writing crimes, though. These are big crimes. He fights against the Nazis.
I know.
He fights the Nazis.
I know the general concept, and I know the storylines of the movies.
This is better than National Treasure.
And the thing, and I looked at him and I went, I had not seen Top Gun until we started dating.
Which, again,
and you think that I've seen Indiana Jones.
Again, no Top Gun. No.
There's
da, 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 da. I mean, playing with the boys, the volleyball scene. Come on. That's Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise at their peak physical state.
I will say this.
Playing with the
We watched a
boys.
movie with Val Kilmer in it the other day, and it was rough Val Kilmer days. Deja Vu. Denzel Washington was in it, and Val Kilmer's in it.
That was the one that you couldn't remember what a ferry was called.
Yeah.
And it's like a boat, and
So
you can
like a
put
big boat,
cars
and you
on
put
it.
cars
And
on
it's like
it,
that has
and I
the
can't-
levels and
I can't think
and
of what it is.
it takes the cars across a
ferry.
ferry. Yeah.
That's it.
That was funny.
I will say though, because I knew that Maverick was going to be coming out, and as I'm watching Top Gun, I had never seen it before, and I'm sitting there, and as the movie is going on, I look over at my boyfriend and I said, his son is going to be the main focus of the new movie that's going to come out. And I said, and he's going to end up being a teacher. And I said, and I guarantee you that's the storyline that they're going to go with. And he was like, you don't know that. I said, Google it. And he goes, how did you know that? I said, it's just a very obvious storyline that they would go for.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
But, so yes. Anyways,
I'm ashamed of you, but I still love you. My love is not dependent on what movies or shows you have seen.
My boyfriend has a list. He has a list on his phone that
So he put Indiana Jones
at the
to
top. Yes, he did. He made sure to put it at
I'm
the
going to
top.
need you to report back. I need you to tell me when you're watching them, and then I need you to report back to me and let me know which one you like the best.
Okay.
I'm flabbergasted.
Yes.
I'm so sad.
Any Julia Roberts or Sandra Bullock movie, though, that's what my mom liked to watch. And so I was, primarily raised by my mom.
Yes.
And so my mom never watched any of those movies.
But it makes me sad that she didn't, because those are great movies.
I mean, I'm sure she saw them at one time, but that's just not her, thing. So that's what I try to tell my boyfriend is for those of you who don't know, my dad died when I was younger. And so for the longest time, even before that, my parents weren't together. And so, my dad showed me the two movies. I remember him showing me specifically Jurassic Park. I was way too young to watch it when I watched it. And Outbreak with the monkeys. Those are the two movies my dad thought to show me. Oh, and Kiss the Girls.
Oh my gosh.
Probably that's where my love of true crime comes from.
I was going to say.
I don't know. Either way. All right. Back on track. Both of the men in our story this week are from Canada. So it's a little important to kind of go through Canada at the time. Quick history. Canada was still kind of like the Louisiana Territory in that there was an upper Canada and a lower Canada. There weren't firm boundaries for the now 13 provinces. And from 1841 to 1867, it went by either the Province of Canada, the United Province of Canada, or the United Canadas.
Oh my, that's confusing.
I know. In 1867, the areas Upper Canada, Lower Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick were all united into a single dominion under the British Empire called Canada. July 1st was considered Dominion Day, as the area was then named the Dominion of Canada. It wasn't until 1982 when the Canada Act was passed. This brought the Constitution of Canada fully under Canadian control and referred to it only as Canada. That is when Dominion Day was changed to Canada Day.
I was alive then.
That was not. I was not. Still had a few more years.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out.
So, just to say that, because some of the people in this, it'll say like where, they were from Lower Canada, and I don't want it to sound like I don't know Canada. Like, that's what it was called at this time.
Right.
So, there you go. Jean Lalime arrived in the Chicago area on August 17th of 1792. Lalime was a goods trader and had been trading his way through the western frontier and Detroit. He was from Quebec, Lower Canada. Lalime was an agent for William Burnett of Canada at the time. In 1800, Lalime bought a homestead for William Burnett from Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable, who we discussed earlier as the father of Chicago. The land was bought for 16 livres. I had to look up how to say that. Livres.
You said that with your whole body.
Well, because it's one of those like
you get when you say it.
Livres. And I was trying to really try and like figure out how to say it because I really didn't want to mess that one up either.
Okay.
Once you convert that to pounds and dollars today, it would be $437.
I was gonna say $500.
It would be 437,000 pound sterling and $601,000. The bill of sale for the land was dated for May 1st of 1800, but was filed in Detroit on September 18th, the same year. This is where the antagonist, maybe, depending on how you see it, of our story comes in. William Burnett, who was Lalime's boss, had a business partner named John Kinsey. Kinsey came to settle in Chicago, and he bought the homestead for himself. So he bought the homestead from Jean-Baptiste de Sable. He bought the homestead that, William Burnett had purchased. Kinsey was a fur trader from Quebec and first traded in Detroit in the Northwest Territory of the United States. Kinsey was known to have developed trade at the Kikiana. Yep, that's how you say it, which was right in the middle of where the Miami tribe or nation was located. In 1785, Kinsey assisted in, quote, rescuing 2 American citizens who had been kidnapped 10 years earlier from Virginia, and they were, quote, adopted into the tribe. Not sure how you're adopted into the tribe when you were kidnapped, but okay. The citizens were sisters, and their names were Margaret and Elizabeth Mackenzie. Margaret went on to marry John Kinsey. So essentially, she just took the MC off of her last name.
There you go.
The couple had 3 children together, and eventually she left Kinsey, took her children, and went back to Virginia.
Oh, bye.
However, as adults, all 3 children ended up moving to Chicago. In 1789, Kinsey lost his business and had to move further away from the western frontier. At this time, the U.S. wasn't on great terms with Canada as far as fur trading was concerned. So Kinsey was just trying to kind of like follow the money. Mm-hmm. Follow the money and see where it goes. Kinsey did marry again 9 years later to Eleanor McKillop. When the family finally made it to Chicago, they had one son named John, and then had 3 more children once they settled. Still too many. The other children were Ellen Marion, Maria, Indiana, and Robert Allen. Yes, her middle name was Indiana.
I see no problem with the name Indiana.
And we just talked about Indiana Jones. How funny. Didn't plan on that. The same year, Kinsey bought the homestead. The governor of the Indiana Territory, William Henry Harrison, appointed Kinsey as the Justice of the Peace. William Henry Harrison might sound familiar to some people. He was the 9th president of the United States. And like I said, he had appointed Kinsey as the Justice of the Peace. Very few places still have a Justice of the Peace, but it is essentially an elected or an appointed person to keep the peace. And from what I understood, they were kind of like the justice and the judge. So
Andy was the Justice of the Peace in Mayberry.
Yeah. However, depending on the area or country that you are in, the definition of what a Justice of the Peace can actually vary wildly. Like it's very different in a lot of different places. But in America at that time, that's what a Justice of the Peace was for. The main location of this case is at Fort Dearborn. This was a U.S. fort built in 1803 near the Chicago River. Captain John Whistler was the one who directed the construction, and it was named after Henry Dearborn, who was the U.S. Secretary of War at the time. The original Fort Dearborn was destroyed, not completely destroyed. I have issues with that. Everything I said it was completely destroyed. Completely destroyed is not a thing, guys. We're just going to go ahead and make sure that everybody is well aware, and it will now forever drive you crazy when you hear other people say it, because completely destroyed is not a thing. If it is destroyed, then it is gone. It cannot be. You were basically saying it was destroyed. That's just irritating. So it was destroyed in the Battle of Fort Dearborn during the War of 1812 in August, but it was rebuilt afterward. The battle that took down the fort lasted a total of 15 minutes. And the Native Americans won the battle, and the fort burned down.
15 minutes.
I know. I hate to seem like we're going down rabbit holes and different trails, but the story isn't like completely together and cohesive. So I have to piece things together to make it all make sense before we get into a lot of stuff. But it's better for me to go ahead and explain some things at the top. Because if you're like me, then you'll forget what happened. But crime and history is what you're here for, so deal with it. There are two important.
Buttercup, is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, because this is another thing that we do have to go into. There are 2 important positions at Dearborn that we have to go over. There is the factor and the sutler. The factor is a military officer who is in charge of basically not screwing over the Native Americans in the area. It's his job. Then there is the sutler, who is not a part of the military. It is a civilian who has political ties and sold goods and provisions to the soldiers. If we have any military listeners, which I think we do have some, this is what today's commissary or exchange would be, but one with no rules. And the sutler can sell goods at whatever cost they please. At this time, each trading post had what was called a factory. This was where European goods were sold, and they were sold at cost. So that's where the factor was. And they sold all of those goods at cost because they were goods coming in from Europe that then some Native Americans were purchasing. So the factor was there to make sure things were being charged fairly at the factory. So that was a case where profit was not a concern because that was not his job.
Right.
They were more concerned with keeping certain fur pelts away from the British and boost the Native Americans' confidence in the U.S. So they did a lot of fur trading at the factor as well. And they were just trying to make sure they didn't get into the hands of the British. Things between the U.S. and British Empire still not great at this point.
Well, I understand that.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Weird. We just threw all their tea in a harbor, but it's fine. Maybe some salty tea. This whole concept of trying to like keep up, good look, it failed. We mentioned John Jacob Astor in a previous episode, but this was a privately funded trader company and had way more capital than the entire factory system.
Oh my.
And the goods were higher quality than what the factory system had. So that was problematic. Then on the other side, you had the sutler who ran the trading post. The sutler had rights to sell whatever they wanted at whatever price they wanted. The only catch was the sutler had to sell goods to those who appointed him at a discounted rate, which I guess if you're charging whatever you want to, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
Fort Dearborn had a mandatory location to shop, and it was Cooper and Whistler's. This place was making so much money off of the soldiers. It's like sickening. Because that was where the soldiers had to shop. It was mandatory. Yes. They charged roughly 50% more for sugar, alcohol, tobacco, and anything else that they needed, especially bullets. Yeah. Cooper of Cooper and Whistler was friends with the doctor at Dearborn, and Whistler was the son of the commander of the fort. Then in January of 1812, it changed hands and it became Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Just kidding. But it did become Messrs. Kinsey and Forsyth. Immediately, there was speculation as to how Kinsey actually landed that gig. But much like everything in life, Kinsey had an in. Stick with me. Whistler, one of the previous sutlers, was related to a lieutenant on base. This lieutenant ended up being replaced with Kinsey's son-in-law. There was also heavy speculation that Kinsey had some kind of dirt on the fort's commander, who was Captain Nathan Held at the time, and he will be in our story as well. After all, Kinsey was the justice of the peace in the area, so he kind of knew the dirt on a lot of people. It was assumed when Kinsey became one of the men to take over, since he was the justice of the peace, that maybe the sutler would actually have fair pricing.
I mean...
Right? And in the beginning, he did. But if they thought that Cooper and Whistler's prices were high, they had no idea what Kinsey was about to do.
Oh, how disappointing.
The factor on the base was Matthew Irwin. Irwin started to see a conspiracy going on between Kinsey and Captain Held. And he wrote a letter to the War Department in January of 1812. Irwin asserted that the two men were into some shady dealings. And his specific problem in a March 10th letter was that, quote, lately ascertained it to be an absolute fact that Messrs. Kinsey and Forsyth offered a gentleman $400 a year to get them appointed at Washington, the settlers for this place. Irwin kept chronicling all of the events he kept seeing at Dearborn and sending letters to the War Department. Irwin soon found two others on the base that agreed with his concerns. They were the surgeon, Dr. Isaac Van Voris, and the interpreter for the fort, Jean Lalime. In April of 1812, two settlers in Bridgeport were murdered by members of the Winnebago tribe. in quotes, I put, here is where Leah is probably going to ask about Winnebago the RV.
I didn't. I pressed my lips together. I had the thought.
But Winnebago Industries, because I did look this up because I knew you would probably ask. Winnebago Industries is named after the county that it's located in, but the county is named after the tribe. So there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You saw the look on my face.
I know.
But I didn't say anything.
It literally says in quotes, here is where Leah is probably going to ask about Winnebago the RV.
I mean, I'm curious where things get their names.
Well, it's unclear why the two settlers were killed, but either way, Kinsey and Helm immediately jumped in, wanting to retaliate. But
however,
not only did they want to retaliate against the Winnebago tribe, they also wanted to attack the Chippewa and the Ottawa tribes, who at this point had been nothing but kind to the people at Fort Dearborn. Our friend Irwin wrote another letter dated April 16th and said, quote, propositions were openly made to murder them, as well as some French persons with Indian wives. This is a direct quote. So, who have, ever since they have been here, manifested peaceable dispositions. The principal persons who advised and insisted upon such measures being carried into effect were the sutler for this garrison and his son-in-law, Lieutenant Helm. So one of those, quote, French persons with Indian wives might have been Lalime, because he did have a wife who was a native, because he was the interpreter.
Yep.
So there are a lot of names I know, like, flying around in this story. So I'm going to go ahead and, like, kind of say who was with who, like sharks versus jets. We're going to go into, like, who.
Thank you so much for doing that.
To who they are. So Kinsey and Helm are the sutlers who overpriced everything and wanted to incite a war with the Native Americans. They also rope in another soldier at this point named George Ronan to help kind of keep the outrage over the murders kind of in the public eye. You know, like, just make sure you just kind of like keep that fire going. Just add a little gasoline. Make sure people haven't forgotten about it. So Irwin, Lalime, and Dr. Van Voris are the ones against pretty much everything that the sutlers were doing, especially trying to incite a war.
Yeah, they're not being fair.
Right. Our newest character, I guess, Ronan, outright told Lalime that he was going to shoot him. And then Helm...
That's very neighborly.
Then Helm said he was going to take the scalp of Irwin, who was...
You kind of need your scalp.
Do what?
You kind of need your scalp.
Kind of. Every now and then, I suppose. So, Helm was detained about a month later in May for plotting to murder 6 Native Americans who had arrived at the fort peacefully. But he was released. Would you like to know why he was released?
Why was he released?
He apologized.
Oh, well, good on him. Did he get a gold star too?
I might have.
Oh, I'm so glad. Did he have to spend a little bit of time in the corner?
They made him sit in the corner and think about what he did for a few days, and then he could go.
A few days?
So why are Kinsey and Helm so set on starting a war? Like, who's to benefit, right? Why would you want to do that? If there was a war, then someone who is a gun runner is going to cash in majorly with the increased demand. Also, if you were illegally trading goods, you have the factor Irwin to worry about, because he's the one that's supposed to be dealing with all the goods trading. Because remember, as the factor, you are the one who maintains fair prices for trading with the local tribes. If you were illegally trading goods, chances are prices are a bit higher. So, a war with those would cause major tension and ruin any relationship between the factor and the tribes, putting the factor out of business, right? Turns out, Kinsey was a gun runner for the British.
Imagine that.
And he was illegally trading with the tribes.
Shocking.
Right?
Shocking.
Dr. Van Voors also had written in a letter to the War Department, and in the letter he said, quote, "I really, honorable sir, conceive my present situation extremely unpleasant, if not truly hazardous. And were I convinced that no exchange, neither in conduct nor in persons, would take place at the post, I should prefer the regions of Zembel to Fort Dearborn. I have the honor to be, with much respect and esteem, sir, your obedient servant." I knew you would love that.
I knew it was coming. That makes me happy.
I know. I saw that when because like I said, some of these I got from like direct transcripts from letters. And so, yeah, he said, "I have the honor to be, with much respect and esteem, sir, your obedient servant." From this communication from the doctor, we can see that things were not going well at Dearborn.
He's like, "Get me out of here."
Right. Well, and so I tried to look up because he said I should prefer the regions of Zembel to Fort Dearborn.
Yeah,
and
I wanted to know where that was.
I don't know. And I tried to look it up several different ways. So I don't know if that was like a slang term for something around that time, but I could not find anything on where that was. But based on context clues, I think that maybe it was just somewhere that was not desirable to go. And he's basically saying, I'd rather go here than be here.
Right.
So, yeah, things weren't going well. And on June 17th of 1812, around 6 p.m., they got worse.
Uh-oh.
Helm went on a rant about Irwin to Dr. Van Voors and Lalime. And supposedly he said, quote, he would give a very handsome treat if the factory would be done away. Kinsey stepped in and, unsurprisingly, took his son-in-law's side immediately. Being the friend of Irwin, Lalime defended his friend Irwin.
As any good friend and stand-up guy would do.
And there is a lot of speculation on what actually happened after this.
But the end result was?
Yeah. There's no trigger warning for this part, for this episode. By the way, I mean, we're going to talk about how he was murdered, but it's not, it's not anything.
It's not like our last episode.
No, it's not like the last episode. So like I said, there's a lot of speculation on what actually happened after this.
And by the way, when I wake up from having a nightmare from our last episode, I'm calling you.
Okay.
Okay, continue.
I'm a heavy sleeper, so good luck.
I'll let it ring. I'm sorry.
Lalime had a pistol and Kinsey a butcher knife. Some say they heard a gun go off. However, what was immensely clear was that Lalime had been stabbed. Kinsey claims that Lalime shot at him and he killed Lalime in self-defense. Other witnesses indicated that the murder was premeditated and Kinsey intended on killing Lalime. There were rumors that Lalime was an informant on all of the corruption going on at Dearborn, and Kinsey just happened to be right at the center of all that corruption. He was in the eye of the hurricane. He was
There's quiet.
Yep.
The yellow sky.
Yep. And you wouldn't want your wrongdoings to get back to anyone.
Nope.
So Kinsey ran and hid for several hours until his son-in-law came for him. You would think, since so many people saw the murder take place, that Kinsey would be detained. But that didn't happen.
It would make sense.
Mm-hmm. Irwin and Dr. Van Voors both saw the murder take place and were threatened by Kinsey and Helm as well. Kinsey shook hands with his son-in-law and left. Just left Fort Dearborn. Even though Kinsey was gone and Lalime had been murdered, things were still not going well at Dearborn.
That's crazy.
Irwin noticed that a few men started regularly following him around and hanging around outside of the factory when he was there. Being a smart man, Irwin decided to bunk with the doctor so they would at least have somebody, to watch each other's back.
Yeah.
Because the doctor was scared too.
Obviously.
Mm-hmm. To add fuel to the fire, a letter came from the War Department in response to one sent by Irwin months before. The letter said that Kinsey's sutler had to be regulated and he couldn't overcharge anyone any longer. So it's kind of like snitches get stitches. And they figured out Irwin was the one that was writing these letters to the War Department.
By the way, I told my nephew that the other day. He didn't get it at all.
Let's see. The same night it was reported that the same night that they got the letter from the War Department, it was reported that Kinsey had been spotted and held. He was the commander that was over the whole base. He ordered Irwin to go with Ronan to catch him. Ronan was the original one that said he was going to shoot Lalime. And you're going to send Ronan with Irwin to go find Kinsey? I'm sorry. What?
What in the setup is this?
I mean, crazy. So Irwin said, no thanks, I'm a pass.
Yeah. Hard pass.
Yeah, it's gonna be a no for me.
Yeah.
And this came with repercussions. Held kicked Irwin out of the sleeping quarters, took away the soldier that Irwin had helping him at the factory, told Irwin he had to replace the soldier in 6 days. Oh, and tore apart his vegetable garden, and wrote a letter to the War Department saying that Irwin was a bad guy and a terrible friend. Kinsey had fled to Milwaukee, which was a Native American Indian territory at the time. Irwin had to also find another interpreter for Fort Dearborn since theirs was just murdered.
Yeah. In front of a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. So July 5th, Irwin left for Fort Mackinac.
It's kind of fun to say.
And ran into the British just as he got there. He became a prisoner of war. In a letter dated June 30th, Dr. Van Voors said, quote, I need not trouble you, sir, with the minutiae of this affair. Suffice it to say that it was a perfect assassination and can be proven to be such. I shall ever be ready when my person is secure to substantiate what I have stated. Which is kind of weird. Kinsey's gone and wasn't a threat to him anymore. And it seemed most of the anger was geared at Irwin. So why did the doctor need to be secure? Right? Well, there are probably more reasons than we know. Because Dr. Van Voors was found dead on a beach 2 weeks later. Once Irwin was released as a prisoner of war, he wrote to the War Department again. This time, he laid out everything regarding the murder and the reasons why he could not go back to Fort Dearborn, including the fact that somehow Kinsey was influencing those left to, quote, get rid of the witnesses.
One by one.
Right. Irwin didn't want to end up like his friends. The War Department wrote him back. And at this time, this was when Dearborn had been burned down in the battle. So Dearborn wasn't there. And Irwin wouldn't need to go back at that time anyways because it wasn't there.
Thankfully.
But Irwin would still get his salary from the War Department until he felt ready to come back to work. And past that, I could not find anything else on Irwin.
Ooh.
So, in 1813, the British arrested Kinsey and Jean-Baptiste Chardonnay. Fancy last name. Chardonnay.
That's
also,
my favorite white, by the way.
Also then living in Detroit, and charged them with treason. They were accused of having corresponded with the enemy while supplying gunpowder to Chief Tecumseh's Indian forces, who were fighting alongside the British. Chardonnay escaped. But Kinsey was imprisoned on a ship for he was headed to England. When the ship was put in port in Nova Scotia, because there was a really bad storm and they had to port, Kinsey escaped. He returned to Detroit by 1814, and although he had previously been like on the British side, he switched sides to the U.S.
Oh. Well, because he was in trouble with the British, so he decided to, hey, guys.
He returned to Chicago. He returned to Chicago with his family in 1816 and lived there right up until his death.
So he never got in trouble.
It gets better. During the kind of 1820s, Kinsey served as a justice of the peace for the newly created Pike County, which was at the time extended from the Mississippi River to Lake Michigan. He was the justice of the peace.
Did they not do a background check on him?
Nah, don't think that was a thing. Kinsey had a stroke on June 6th of 1828 and died just a few hours later. So what about Lalime? Well, Lalime was originally buried within sight of Kinsey's house.
Oh.
So Kinsey's family, every time they left their house, saw the gravesite of the man that their patriarch of their family murdered.
Did they know that this was the gravesite?
Mm-hmm.
Did they know the whole history of it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dear.
Which kind of reminds me of when Aaron Burr's last wife intentionally found Alexander Hamilton Jr. You know what I mean?
Just twist that just a little tighter.
Right. So he was originally buried there because the European settlement was kind of just real thin in that area. Mm-hmm. And it said that the Kinsey family maintained the gravesite. So that's how we know that they knew it was there. After he died in 1828, John H. Kinsey, which was the child of the Kinsey family, had Lalime's remains exhumed and reinterred in the churchyard of St. James Church. A little bit of guilt going on.
I was going to say, was this out of guilt?
Yeah.
Or, so this was after his dad died.
Yes.
So kind of maybe respect as well. Just,
yeah,
you deserve better.
Right. So
I can respect that.
In 1891, a coffin was discovered at Wabash Avenue and Illinois Street near the Rush Street Bridge. Based on the research of Joseph Kirkland, who is just a historical researcher, the bones inside were believed to be Lalime's. The remains are now held by the Chicago History Museum. And for a long time, I'll put a photo up on our Instagram. For a long time, there was a kind of like a shadow box built into a wall that Lalime's bones were displayed in.
No. What is it? What? I don't understand.
Isn't that weird? So that is what happened. That's the first murder that took place in Chicago. And one thing that I found really interesting, I think it was the Chicago Reader that pointed it out, was that they were talking about how if you are Jewish, you can't go to places where there's like a dead body. Like it's a certain type of Jewish faith. You can't go where there's been a dead body, or like, you're like not even go to a funeral unless you're directly related to them. So because of this, there's a lot of places that some people who are of that, sect can't go. One of those is the Chicago Zoo, because apparently there might be some graves underneath it.
Really?
So they can't go there because
that's intriguing.
There's dead people under the ground. Like, you know what I mean? So they can't, because of this, they can't go, visit there. And hold on. So I looked at back up on this article, and yeah, it is apparently at one point some bodies were reburied when they were found in a former cemetery. But this was in the 1870s and 1880s, and the researcher who did it found that there was a 12,000 corpse gap. So 12,000 corpses were not accounted for. So it's said that they might be under the zoo. So what this article was saying is it was talking about, which there is a point to this, I promise. It's very interesting. Because Lalime's body is in the Chicago History Museum, right? If you are this particular like sect of the Jewish community, you can't come in contact with a dead body. And there's like a specific ceremony that cleanses you if you come in contact with death, and it has to be done by a specific person. And there's only 9 of these certain people who have ever fit the requirements to be able to do that ceremony. Yeah, I think it's called, and I'm sorry if this is not right, Kohenim.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Kohenim. Anyway, so if you are in this area and you find that you're even in a building with a dead body, like you have to leave immediately. They can't go to funerals unless it's spouse, parents, or children. They can't walk under the shadow of a branch from a tree that overlaps a different tree that falls over a cemetery. That is why medically, it says like, that's why people who are in this particular sect choose careers in dentistry, so they don't have to do the cadaver work in college because they can't touch dead bodies. So there is this entire guide for Chicago that tells people of, I think it's Kohenim, something like that. I don't know how to say it. That is a guide that tells people where they can go because of, there could be like, you can't go anywhere where there's a dead body. So if you don't know, then you can't go anywhere. And so for a while, they couldn't go to the Chicago History Museum because Lalime's remains were in it.
That's interesting, though.
Yeah.
I mean, but then think about like in New York, the National Museum of Natural History and things like that. That keeps you from going to so many places.
Yep. And so they ended up at some point.
Does this extend to animal bodies?
It just said dead. I'm not sure.
I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
This piqued my interest.
It's yeah, it was very interesting reading into it, but so when they were trying to make the guide, the person who made that guide called the History Museum to ask if there were any dead bodies on the premise.
Mm-hmm.
There were bodies at some point that they had that went to other places, and the only one left was Lalime.
Mm-hmm.
And
which I will say is weird.
It is very weird. Later on, they did a temporary exhibit in the Chicago History Museum that was called Shalom Chicago. And it was like for the Jewish history of the city. Well, think about it. They can't go in the building. So the museum took Lalime's remains and moved them to a storage facility off-site so that they could come to see this exhibit that they made for them. So, yeah, I found it really interesting.
I mean, I've been to a lot of places and seen a lot of history. I've been to castles in Scotland, which everybody needs to do. I'm just saying, go. It's cool.
Right.
And I love the history, but I mean, I'm just saying, I love to see the artifacts. I love to see like the jewels, the crown jewels. I've seen those. I love to see the different dresses and, the different fashions of the time. I do not need to see a decaying body in these fashions.
So do you want to see the wall picture?
No.
It's not bad.
I mean, it does nothing for me.
But you need to, so for a super long time, though, this is how his remains were.
Okay, show me.
Okay, I'm going to show Leah the photo.
I mean,
literally, it's like a picture.
What's the point in that?
I don't know. I'll post it on the...
Show me a picture of what he looked like. Don't show me his bones. Like, what does that tell me about him? He had bones.
I know. It's
like
and I guess it's just because he's considered the first murder in Chicago.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But show me a picture of him. I mean, that does nothing for me. That shows me he had bones. Like, I am not Bones, from the TV show. She'd be able to get something from that. This tells me nothing.
It's very weird.
Nothing.
That's the first murder in Chicago, and a little bit of Jewish history that I probably butchered.
And the fact that I do not need to see a dead body. Show me fashion. Show me artifacts. I will look at a chamber pot and say, what an ornate pot to do your business in.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm a pass. It's a no for me.
I mean, I'm not saying I love it, but I mean, I will say they took a lot of care in making something for such a gross business look pretty. I will say that.
True, still. No.
But I'd rather see that than some decaying body.
It's just the bones. It's fine.
Do you think that glass coffins will ever take off? Remains to be seen. Bump.
Do you know where the term Saved by the Bell comes from?
Yes. Because people were buried alive and they'd put a string attached to a bell up above so you could pull it and ring the bell.
You know what's real creepy to think about, though?
What?
So that's where graveyard shift comes from. That's where that term comes from, because somebody had to be there overnight to make sure. So
I would hate that.
Imagine there's a storm.
You hear the bells.
And you hear all the bells going off.
Oh, gosh, Kayla.
Now,
you're going to fuel my nightmares.
Now imagine that you're in the coffin ringing your bell.
And you don't know there's a storm. Stop it now. Oh, my nightmares tonight.
I'm sorry, people.
Nightmares tonight.
That's just...
Why do I hang out with you?
Oh, because I'm hilarious.
I'm going to go from being in a coffin trying to ring a bell to floating on a squirrel down a river. That's what's going to happen. That's going to be my dream.
I wonder if they could make a muff out of squirrels.
Stop it! I mean, if it was already really bloated. But, anyway.
I mean, you never know.
Stop it.
You could put your hands in the body and then the tail could just kind of like hang out there.
That could be your strap.
Yeah, that'd be good. So
right.
We have a website. You can find all information on us there. It is onenationundercrime.com. Super simple.
Not on us, on our podcast. Yep.
We are One Nation Under Crime on Facebook and Instagram, and at ONUC Pod on Twitter. If you love our podcast, follow us on your favorite podcatcher, and please rate the podcast 5 stars only, please. We've discussed this. If you have nothing nice to say nothing at all. And if you leave us a 5-star review and you leave a review with it, not just 5 stars, like an actual comment, we have stickers. And yes, if you will screenshot your review that you did and you send it to us and send me your address, I will mail you a free sticker.
Hey, are you going to put a picture of the sticker on Instagram? I think you should.
Yes, I'm going to put this picture of the stickers up. So they are new. They are fancy. They are dishwasher proof. They are really cool. So
they're high quality.
They are high quality and they look really good. So if you leave us a review, take a picture of it. I have to see that there's a comment and stuff there too, and then send it to me. Prefer if you do it on Apple Podcasts, just because that helps boost our ratings more on Apple. And that's how a lot of podcasts get found. But do it on any podcatcher that you're on. We appreciate it either way. We have a Patreon if you are into that. We've talked about maybe doing a couple of Patreon episodes a month for history. But we got to get subscribers to do that. So, thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate you sticking around.
Yes, we do.
And Leah's about to fall asleep.
I'm not.
So
maybe I am. I'm old, y'all.
So, see, she can call herself old, but
I'm
when
not
I
old,
say that she's
I'm
old,
just setting
she's
my way. I will say, now this is the latest. I think this is the latest that we've recorded.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. This is next to latest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a weeknight, and my husband.
It's a school night.
It is.
That's what I call it. It's a school night.
It's a school night. And my husband and I have a routine. You know, we've been married for 20 years, and we have a routine. We watch the Andy Griffith Show in bed before we go, turn out the lights. And while we were recording this, he sends me a text and says, Andy's on. That means it's bedtime. Mm-hmm. So the lights are going to be out when I get home. Just throwing that out there. See, the things I do for my fans.
True. Things we're here for you guys.
That's right.
So yeah, we will see you here next week. Same time.
Different crime.
And remember that there isn't always liberty and justice for all, especially in this case. We'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.
Bye.